Hi, welcome. Thanks for joining us today for Future Apprenticeships. This is season 3 and episode 4, and this is all around supporting learners with SEND. My name is Gavin O'Meara. I am the CEO and founder of FE News, and thank you for joining us today. Anyone who knows me knows that this is a really important topic for me, and particularly looking at the future of apprenticeships, but also how we support everyone. And everyone's about to have equal opportunities, better progress. Today we've got a really cool show. We've got like 2 incredibly good guests, but I'm joined again by my co-host Suzanne Slater from NCFE. Suzanne, I wonder if I could bring you back into the studio. How are you? I'm
good, thanks. It's good to be back.
Yeah, I had a week off last week.
Absolutely.
So much is happening at the moment in the future apprenticeships, but we've also recently had the SEND review, there's so much happening at the moment. This feels like that happened a couple of weeks ago and stuff. There's just such a huge amount happening in the sector at the moment. What really do you sort of see, Suzanne, for being the potential for the SEND review and looking at apprenticeships?
I think it's raising awareness, isn't it? It's raising awareness for the opportunities that apprenticeships can create for learners with special educational needs and disabilities. And I think very much, we a lot of employers are probably quite well versed now in terms of how to support their apprentices with visible disabilities. And I think what's really interesting is whether employers have the confidence to support those learners with who kind of have more hidden requirements, and I think the SEND review is really kind of bringing that to the forefront. And I think apprenticeships play a key part in supporting young people. In the SEND review, the purpose was to ensure every child has an equal opportunity to sort of thrive and be prepared for adult life. And I think apprenticeships are a real steering towards that. They provide that real support, that learning, that mentorship, but in a work environment. So, learners with special educational needs can kind of get that additional support. They can get that additional guidance. They can develop new knowledge, develop new skills, but also it's about those kind of those key skills that are expected, those behaviours that are expected within a workplace. It's developing and learning those, which are key, because those skills are also transferable, not just within a workplace but throughout life as well. And I think the apprenticeship provides that. I almost want to say kind of a bit more of a safe environment where there's a lot more mentorship from a training provider, from their employer. And that there's a larger support mechanism and network around that apprentice to enable them to thrive, develop, and achieve, those barriers that any apprentice hits, but those with additional hidden barriers. I think an apprenticeship's a great way to sort of to give that additional support that individual might need.
Yeah, no, definitely. One thing I forgot to say right at the beginning of the show actually is we're live. So if anyone wants to get involved with comments from the audience, please do. They cannot be an essay. That'd be great, because it's a bit weird when it goes above your head. And we're 30 minutes for this stream, so if you could pop them in before 31 minutes, like we've had on one episode, would be really good. Can I be open? We've had this episode 4. I think it's really important, and I think supporting learners with SEND. It's interesting. I think everyone's felt a little bit uncomfortable with the term SEND, to be honest with you, like from when we thought about the episode, how we can support learners, because we've been steering more and more to like I think you said, Suzanne, is people with very obvious barriers. I think everyone's really, there's so much more to go with that. There's so much more we need to do. No one's got it cracked, and no one's got all the solutions for that yet, but we're on a path to sort of improving that. It really feels that, and I know it's a long way to go, and I know there's so much more to go. But I think with those with hidden barriers, I think is something where it still feels like we've got a long way to sort of get to. Really,
I agree.
I think I'm hoping since the pandemic, when someone was having to, we was all asked to wear masks, and we had different people with, a daisy chain lanyard around their neck. I don't think that we should have a similar thing for people that have got hidden barriers to learning, but I think it's made people start to think that there's some things which are hidden, that it isn't, there's some things which are there. And I think maybe for me, I felt a little bit uncomfortable with the word send for this one, to be open. And I'm thinking, the more we've talked through this show, I've wanted it to be more around how we help people with hidden barriers, and particularly how we're inclusive, like how we're neuro inclusive, and maybe how we're thinking about language and how we're thinking about building things in to better support everyone, and support everyone to better to sort of really shine. I think that's a good time to bring in our guests.
Yeah,
really, because we've got two really cool guests. We've got Charlotte Jones, who's operations and project manager at GMLPN, and we've got Louise Karwowski, who is director of education at Cognassist. Lou, wonder if I could bring you in. Charlotte, wonder if I could bring you in. Welcome to the studio. How are you all?
Good. Very pleased to be here.
Really pleased you're here. Suzanne, I didn't know if you want to kick it off, because I know that we got a whole bunch of questions for you, like Lou and Charlotte. So I think there's some really interesting pointers, and for everyone that Charlotte has done some really interesting work with enabling autistic adults into apprenticeships as well. And I wanted to sort of maybe share some stats on that a little bit. But Suzanne, I don't know if you wanted to kick it off at all.
Yeah, definitely. I think certainly from the work that NCFE's done with GMLPN, and kind of through our own feedback through providers and centres, it's clear that the traditional pathways kind of aren't always necessarily suitable for learners with hidden barriers. And what can we do? It kind of is an education community in thinking specifically around apprenticeships to improve inclusivity. I'll put that maybe to Charlotte first, if you don't mind.
Yeah, of course. So I think the learnings from the project, we found some practical tips that both training providers and employers can really take away and use. Some of our individuals that have been referred have communication passports, so that's something that an individual can create themselves that really details their learning needs, but not also that, talking about strategies to be able to overcome them in the workplace. So I think having that clear message from the individual at the get-go saying, I really understand my needs, this is what I can do to be able to overcome them, but this is what you as a potential employer could support me with. I think that is something that is definitely worth looking at, but it's also empowering them to do that. I know we talked about language just before I joined on the call, and not everyone wants to go to an employer and say, look, I have this learning difficulty, whatever it is. And I think there's a piece of work around empowering those individuals to really kind of own what the needs are and how they can manage it, but also focus on the benefits that they bring to the organisation. So I think that is a massive piece of work in terms of that language and barriers to the misconceptions around learning and SEND learners.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, what you touched on there as well, about individuals who don't really want to take that to an employer. And do you think that we've still, are still in a situation where they might be afraid to do that because of how they may be judged and, by the employer, and that may affect their opportunities with that employer?
Yeah, definitely. I think some referral agencies, we've had feedback from some individuals where they're being actively told not to kind of state up front what the learning difficulty is. So I think, like I said, there's just a huge piece of work that needs to go on around that empowerment of individuals and making sure that they are confident in being able to say, look, I do have this learning difficulty, but I can bring X, Y, and Z to your business, and if you support me in this way, it'll benefit us both, really.
Yeah.
Do you know what, Charlotte? That's the point, isn't it? Because this is it's two-pronged. So it's the learner and the support they require, but it's also a culture change on the employer's part, because an employer shouldn't be afraid to encourage all types of diversities to apply and be supported correctly in employment.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, 100%.
There is a fear, there is a stigma, there is a fear. We do need a culture change, and it does start with conversations like this, where we do talk about language and what works and what doesn't work, and it's okay to ask, and it's okay to ask for clarity, and it's okay to ask for support and training and awareness as well.
I do think that there's maybe an element of fear from an employer perspective in terms of, okay, I want to be inclusive, but how can I make sure that this individual, what can I do to make sure that this individual thrives within my kind of work environment? And maybe there's, a lot more we can do to support employers as well, in terms of education and, how to get the best out of individuals, how to give them the best sort of support, what adaptations might they have to make to their environment to ensure that learner thrives.
And also, Suzanne, having a neurodiverse individual as part of your network, ask them. They will influence your processes. They will improve things. To have that on the inside is so powerful.
Definitely. I think employers are the key point. So with an apprenticeship, they may only be there for the time of the apprenticeship. Obviously, ideally, we would want them to stay with that employer. But if you're changing the culture of the employer, that is a legacy that will continue. It won't just be for that one apprentice. It'll be for any neurodiverse or whatever it may be within that organisation. So I think employers are definitely the key part to it.
Yeah, definitely. If you're talking, about neurodiverse, members of staff, it's also sort of taking the huge benefits that you can have from having new ways of thinking. Like I think Matt Hancock is trying to go on to into the jungle, trying to say he's supporting made by dyslexia. I mean, seriously, I don't know how getting bugs out of mud is doing that. But if you think that if you was to try to avoid neurodiversity, you'd avoid, say, someone like Richard Branson, who's one of the greatest sort of business minds in several generations in the UK and internationally. You think it's got to be a cultural change around how can we embrace everyone, because everyone's got strengths. We're going through a time of mass, real difficult times of employing people. Who knows if that's going to flip soon with what's happening with the economy? But it's bonkers. I wanted to talk to you, Charlotte, about GMLPN, because you did a pilot with NCFE around autistic individuals. To give a stat, ONS, so Office for National Statistics, in 2021 showed that only 22% of autistic adults are in any kind of employment. What is that about? Seriously, what is that about? That is a shocking fact. Just what is that about? So maybe if you could explain the situation and what you did and the findings, Charlotte. I mean, that'd be really cool, because 22% of autistic adults in employment. Seriously, what is that about? So, how can we sort of address that?
Yeah, of course. I think we did a lot of research with different providers, employers and referral agencies at the get-go of the project. And one of the things was around confidence and having that lack of confidence in kind of employing or supporting or even talking to an individual about their diagnosis. So confidence, I think, is a big thing, as well as employers. We found that a triangulated support really, really helps. I think, Suzanne, you said about apprenticeships being a safe space. They've got that training provider who will be providing additional support all throughout their apprenticeship. So that obviously massively helps. But also we got buy-in from the referral agency at the get-go. For autistic individuals, some autistic individuals, they don't like meeting new people. They don't like they like building trust and relationships. So having that referral agency being involved in the get-go, they kind of already one step ahead. They've got that trust already with the referral agency. So then when they're bringing the provider in or the employer, they kind of already started the process. They know they've got some sort of relationship. So I think triangulated support of the provider, the referral agency and the employer is really, really vital. But also bringing in the parents as and when relevant for the individual. Not every individual wants the mum and dad to be on every call or whatever it may be, but I think we found some parents of sending individuals want to be involved in everything. So I think there's a balancing act as well as kind of involving parents within that conversation. One of the main aims of the project was we kind of picked up that confidence of supporting individuals, and we thought we really need to upskill and support our training providers, our employers and referral agencies for this project to be able to work. We can't just send autistic individuals into training providers if they're not confident themselves in doing it. So we've developed some toolkits, and what we've done is launched an autism and apprenticeship online community through the Cash alumni platform. I know from my research, when you type in autism or apprenticeship, there's so much information out there. You can't sit and scour Google for 20 pages to find the answer to what you need. And we know that those in education are time poor. So that online community is kind of a safe space to put resources, share case studies, look at best practice, deliver events. Louise and Cognassist have delivered a few events on there. So really it being a one-stop shop to find out more information about autism and apprenticeships.
Yeah, no, that's really, really interesting. If from your findings, so if say someone was in Cornwall or Kent, what would you sort of give us recommendations for them to be able to sort of roll out a similar sort of scheme, really?
Yeah, of course. I think the communication and the buy-in, as I said earlier, that triangulated support, I think, is the key thing of getting something like this set up. You really need the training providers to be on board. We've been really lucky. Every training provider that we've approached have been really, really open and say, look, we might not get it right the first time, but we want to learn from it as well. So having a training provider that is willing to work with you, not just do what they normally do, but really work with you and adapt what they're doing slightly to kind of support these individuals. And also from referral agencies as well. I think that's, like I said, that's really, really important in that first step in kind of progressing them on to something else. So yeah, I think that triangulated wraparound support of building a trusted and safe environment for the individual to be able to progress.
Yeah, no, that's cool. Lou, can I ask you, then we're talking about people that are diagnosed, if you know what I mean. So we got prior knowledge, if you know what I mean. Can we talk about all those learners? Because I know we've talked about this loads of times before, that maybe suspect, but then don't realise that they have additional needs and maybe built in loads of coping mechanisms, stuff like that. Can we talk about that? Because that's a huge proportion of people.
It is, yeah. I mean, we talk about this stat a lot because it's so staggering. We're identifying 1 in 3 learners at lower levels with hidden needs. At higher levels 6 and 7, it's 1 in 5, which is still significant. And you're right, like a lot of times the learners don't even know themselves that there's a need there. So how could somebody else identify that need just by looking at somebody or just by working with somebody? Like when I did the Cognassist assessment, I wasn't identified with a need, but my lowest domain was verbal memory. And it was like a light bulb moment, like ding, it all clicked into place why I struggled. Like if I didn't have the access to note-taking abilities, for example, I can't remember what happens in a meeting. I'm not very good at that. And going back to Charlotte's point, it empowered me to have that information about myself, because I can now ask, if I'm in a phone conversation, I can ask the person on the other end to send me my actions. And it's just a slight tweak to help me work to my best. So that's what this is all about, really. So, like talking about access for all, that's what this is. Like we need to understand how we all think and learn so we can work best ourselves and with each other.
Yeah, no, definitely. Can we talk about this sort of leads into really initial assessment and how we can ensure equality and quality for all? And I mean, is there anything in particular that we should be considering around it? And that's open to everyone. But I don't know, maybe Lou, if you wanted to kick that off, because I know that you've got a lot of experience with initial assessment and stuff like that.
Yeah, for me, the initial assessment can't just be a skills test, can't just be functional skills. It has to be a holistic assessment of that individual. So cognitive assessment, mental health assessment, even questions around sort of living arrangements. Does the learner live alone? Do they live with their family? Do they live with a partner? What does that look like? What does the area where they live in look like? All of this pieces together the proper picture, and that's the accurate starting point, because then you know what you're working with.
Yeah, no, definitely. Anyone want to add anything to it at all? Or?
I just think. Go on, Charlotte.
I was just going to agree and say getting that initial assessment right at the get-go sets you up for whether it's an apprenticeship or whatever it is. It sets the individual and the provider and the employer as well up to really understand what it is they need to be doing throughout the length of the apprenticeship, or like I said, whatever it may be. So yeah, just agreeing with Lou.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, Lou, and agree with absolutely everything that you've said. It's about that full picture that really enables to give that full level of support. I think, and I speak from experience of working within FE, working within a college in quite a deprived area. The staff, a lot of the time, even if they were provided with that information, may not actually know what to do, you know, with that information and what sort of support mechanisms they need to put in place. And I think that, again, that's something we really need to look at, and, you know, in terms of educating the educators on how
100%.
to best support. And I think, you know, there's more awareness around this now, and I think a lot of, you know, teachers and educators are seeking this information themselves, because they truly want to support these individuals. They truly want, you know, them to achieve and maximise their potential. But sometimes aren't quite sure, when they're faced with some of the challenges, you know, that these individuals may bring to them, exactly what to do.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think, can I just bring in as well, I want to go into that in a lot more detail in a minute, actually, because you made a really, really interesting point. But Nigel is made a really interesting point around really English and maths, but I get the point, Nigel, and thanks for the comment and stuff around, surely we've got to be able to help train, educate people, but how, if we know how their brain works, then surely we can understand and help equip someone to, you know, if we know their learning learning style is wrong term, but what helps them to better, like Lou, you know, for you need to better, you understand about action points for, you know, like what you need to know for around sort of you know, taking things from verbal cues, and how do you then jot things down if you can't take notes. And I think, you know, surely this should be done early on, shouldn't it? You know, that we should be equipping the learner all the way through their life. We're talking about then lifelong learning beyond apprenticeships and stuff like that. If we can equip them to understand and progress with learning, then surely. So Nigel, yeah, I 100% agree with what you're saying there. Why? why isn't this done earlier? You know.
And, you know, like, so a difficulty with maths, for example, may not actually be a numeracy difficulty. It might be a visual perception difficulty. So if that information is presented verbally, the learner can do maths. So it's, you know, when people say, "Oh, I can't do maths, you know, is beyond me," that's not true. It's just not packaged in the correct format for that type of brain. So yeah, everybody needs to understand how they think to better learn.
Yeah, no, definitely. Suzanne, I think you made a really interesting point, educating the educators. Anyone got any thoughts on that at all, around how we can equip leaders to equip their staff go up the other way, how to equip their leaders, because it's all about the learner. How do we help every learner to be able to get the maximum out of them? How do we educate educators with thinking around neuro-inclusive, send very obvious sort of barriers, but also those hidden barriers? How can we help all educators to be able to get the maximum out of their learners?
I think that is, like I said, that second aim for us around really supporting the training providers to be able to support the individuals. That online community where we start, it's not everything, and we're not saying it is everything, and there's more that we can do. But I think that is a good space that we can start putting all this information on, putting these resources. As I said, people in education are time poor. They've not got they might want to sit and find the answer to something, but they might not have the time to sit and spend, as I said, 2 hours on Google. So having something that is easy accessible, I think, is really, really important for them. And like you said, they know where to go for the answer. They know if they've got a question, they know who to ask, that kind of thing. Just making it easier for them, because like I said, they don't have a huge amount of time to be able to find this extra information out, really.
I think there's something Louise touched on before as well, which is having the confidence to ask the individual, you know, and having that honest conversation about, you know, we've assessed all of these things in terms of, you know, your social situation, you know, kind of your academic ability, you know, or mental health, and having the confidence to actually have that conversation. Because I think sometimes as an educator, you know, you think, oh, I don't, should I mention that? Should I not mention that? And I think it's about being able to have that open conversation. And what you said, Louise, about having it with the individual to say, you know, we recognise and have identified all of these factors. What can we do? You tell us what we can do. But I definitely think there's a fear around doing that, a fear of, you know, maybe upsetting someone or hurting someone's feelings, or maybe crossing the line in terms of, you know, that conversation. And I think that's something that, you know, it's really sensitive. But I think we, as probably educators, need to have more confidence to do. And I think the learners would probably appreciate that conversation and that, you know, support.
Absolutely. And that talks to equity, doesn't it, over equality? You know,
Yeah.
equality, Gavin, we've laughed about this in the past, like how many dyslexic students have come to me waving a yellow overlay because that's just what is given to you if you're dyslexic. And like, nobody bothered to ask that person, does colour actually change anything when you're reading? And if so, is there a specific colour that works? Like, it's just like, here, have a yellow overlay, off you go.
Yeah.
So equality is, you know, a step, but equity is what we're aiming for sure.
Yeah, and it's excellence, isn't it? Really, is what we're aiming for. Do you know what I mean? Like, how can we provide an excellent learning environment and situation for a learner? Because then we're making them a lifelong learner, aren't we? Then they're going to come back to the provider, they're going to come back to the organisation, they're going to come back to, and you're just developing that relationship overall, aren't you? I think we've also touched upon it, but Suzanne, I don't know if you want to ask this actually, but you know, there's the whole thing around the National Autistic Society report, and I think that's interesting because it particularly showed that 60% of employers were worried about getting support for an autistic employee wrong, rather than right. Do you know what I mean? That's interesting. I know you've worked a lot around that, so I didn't know if you wanted to sort of throw the question out there, really.
Yeah, I mean, it's just around how can we tackle this? You know, employers are saying that they're worried about getting it wrong. And I think there's an element within educators as well, worried about getting it wrong. You know, how do we tackle this sort of head on and give employers and educators as well more confidence? Yeah, Charlotte, do you want to?
Yeah, sorry. I think like there is that fear. You don't want to upset people. You don't want to make them feel uncomfortable. But I think what we found is that it doesn't necessarily matter if you get it 100% right the first time. I think the individual would appreciate it more if they can see that you try and you're working with them to try and find a solution. So whatever it may be. But there's that fear of employers thinking they need to get it 100% right the first time. But I think really it's more about working together with the individual, regularly reviewing the needs and saying, right, well, last month we said we'd try this. Is this working? What else can we do? And it being an ongoing discussion as well. So yeah, I think there's definitely a fear of, like I said, thinking of you need to be 100% right the first time when that's probably, in reality, that probably won't happen for an employer who may have not worked with a neurodiverse individual before, especially.
Yeah. Louise?
You know, this is all evolution. Like, we're never going to get to the finish point, to the end point. So we started this conversation talking about language and how, you know, we don't feel comfortable with the terminology send anymore, you know, like, so that is evolving. That's, you know, that's steeped in legislation in the past, but so we have to use it. But things are evolving, the conversation is evolving, and, you know, support is evolving, what people need is evolving. So we need to keep communicating and keep asking individuals what they need and what we can do better.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think it's a lot of this is also talking about communication, isn't it? You know, like communicating with learner, communicating with educator. We're nearly at the end. But I just want to throw a question out there, really. Yeah, there's a term in the digital space which is sort of come out, and people have understood why it's more important after the pandemic, because we think of digital with user experience and thinking how things are designed so as it works on a mobile, say, really well, so it's not taking up loads of data, or it sort of loads really quick on a machine for everyone to be able to utilize. Do we need to be thinking around the user experience and language and neural inclusivity with what we're doing with how we present materials for educators to make it easier for them, how we make it easier for learners to be able to just have the right language, the right environment for everyone to not feel awkward and like sort of treading on eggshells and stuff like that? Or am I just off on a wild one? Anyone got any thoughts on that at all around sort of language and being neuro inclusive by design, I suppose is a good way of putting it, really, or not?
No, I think definitely that language and that creating the environment, especially for autistic individuals through the project, that trust and feeling that you are in that safe environment is really key. So without that, they're probably not going to get the best outcomes for themselves in the learning or with their employer. So yeah, I definitely think that's something that needs to happen.
Charlotte, did you come across anything within your findings where you felt that the learning material that was available for the learners or for the providers, was that suitable, or would that have benefited from being adapted or, you know, changed?
Yeah, so we ran Ambitious About Autism ran a really, really useful webinar about how providers can just make small changes to forms that individuals need to fill in. So I think providers definitely need to go back and look at what forms they're giving out, whether it's online or paper or whatever format they're in. But yeah, that was a really, really beneficial webinar to the members and the providers that are involved in the project, about just taking a step back and not just using it because that's what you use, but really thinking about the learner at the end and how they perceive and use that resource. So yeah, definitely.
Lou, any thoughts?
Yeah, you might be putting up barriers through non-accessible resources without even realizing. So when we talked about that statistic of 22%, one of the barriers to that may be that neurodiverse individuals can't actually get over the first barrier of the website, for example, or a job description. Yeah. So you need to start right at the beginning to attract neurodiverse talent.
Yeah, no, definitely. If you could have one wish, one dream, what would you want to see around sort of addressing how to support more SEND learners, or is it language, or is it neuro-inclusivity? What would the one thing you'd want to see? Suzanne, what would you want to see?
Well, my point, I think we're already seeing it with the work that Charlotte's done, and to be honest, a lot of the work that Louise does as well. We're starting on that journey. So for me, it's seeing that work being more widely accepted and used. The toolkits that you were talking about, Charlotte, Louise. The assessments that Cognassist provides. It needs to be more widely used across the whole education community, and starting, in primary. Primary students need to understand what, how they learn and how they, what tools they need to improve their learning.
Yeah, no, definitely. Charlotte, what would you want to see?
I think taking it from a conversation to practical things that people put. It's great having these conversations, and the more awareness we start raising about these issues are amazing. But then taking the next step and thinking, right, as a provider, what can I do to even just make the recruitment process a little bit more inclusive? So yeah, taking it from the conversation to that practical, this is what we can do now to support.
And mine's a combination of the two. We've seen the power of cognitive assessment, which is great. But as Suzanne said before, then what do you do with it? So as Charlotte said, that's all well and good, but let's implement it. Let's use this result now to make change. Cognitive assessments for all, with the understanding of what to do about them.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. So we wrap it up. So thanks everyone for your time today. I hope, audience, if you watched us live or if you watched this on catch up, that you found this really helpful. Suzanne, thank you once again for joining me and hosting this. Charlotte and Lou, thanks so much for sharing different insights as well. This is totally co-produced, so thank you to the team at NCFE. Sam, Elliot, Lindsay, making this all happen. Team FE News, thank you Finley, thank you Holly, thank you Danielle, thank you for supporting and making this all the magic come together. So this is we're getting sort of midpoint now on our sort of season of Future of Apprenticeships. So if you could join us next week for Future of Apprenticeships, and we're looking at endpoint assessment next week, which I think is a massive topic. So join us next week. That's going to be 10 a.m. Thursday the 17th. And thanks everyone for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you really, really soon.